You're a senior manager at a global firm, and you're about to sign an important deal with a Chinese company. After your flight to Guangzhou, the officials greet you and they invite you over for dinner. Here is what could happen to you.
The English believe it's a slur on your host's food if you don't clear your plate. Whereas the Chinese feel you're questioning their generosity if you do. At HSBC, we never underestimate the importance of local knowledge. HSBC, the world's local bank.
Now this is fairly lighthearted, but here is another story of how cultural miscommunication led to a devastating consequence. In 1945, near the end of World War II, the winning Allies issued a declaration to call for Japan's unconditional surrender. The Japanese Prime Minister, when questioned by the journalists, mumbled this single word, mokusatsu. Now this has several different meanings in Japan, depending on the context. What he meant was withholding comment until he makes a final decision. The Allies' interpretation, however, refusal. Within days, Hiroshima was bombed. Now, this was an extreme example, but think about this. Even within this room of 47 students, we represent 19 countries. That's 19 different styles of communication. Just imagine when you go out into the world, the diversity of cultures you may encounter. You may be selling a product to German companies. You may be negotiating with Brazilians, and you may be working for a Chinese CEO. So that's why today we'd like to introduce the 3 A's of global communication: to be aware, adapt, and acknowledge the cultural differences.
Culture underpins a lot of social norms and expectations of how to behave in the different groups and organizations that we are part of. Culture is also very relative, and it is also not homogeneous. So in a larger society, there can be smaller groups within the culture, within the society, which have very different culture from the bigger society. So having an understanding and being aware of the different dimensions of culture will help us become more sensitive to the different groups that we work with and the different countries that we may live in or we participate in activities with. This is a framework that we adapted from Professor Hofstede, and we see 4 dimensions of culture: power distance, direct, indirect, individualism, and short-term versus long-term orientation. Power distance is really about hierarchy. Is it flat or is it a pyramid? Is the leader the first among equals, or is he the king on the throne? I've worked in many organizations with very different cultures, and every time I need to organize a meeting, I always need to think about how to sit people, how to arrange people. Is it in a circle, or is it by order of seniority and hierarchy? Direct versus indirect. Direct cultures tend to be very task-oriented, very verbal, very explicit in the way they communicate. Indirect cultures, on the other hand, rely a lot more on context, non-verbal cues, implicit information to complete the message. So Israel is a great example of a very direct culture. One of our classmates shared with us that Israelis are more direct than Americans. They say it as it is, no sugarcoating. Individualism versus collectivism. The question to think about is the individual the pivotal unit in the group, or is the group and the society and the culture encouraging the person to be conforming and to be interdependent with others? In individualistic societies and cultures, it is very important to voice your own opinion. I think Stanford is a great example. In Stanford, we are encouraged to think critically, to challenge, to question. And I'm sure many of you would have questioned the instructors, the lecturers, and the guest lecturers that walk through our classrooms. The last one is short-term versus long-term orientation. Are we looking for the here and now, Or are we thinking about a partnership towards a longer term? Are we looking for quick results, instant gratification? Or are we thinking about building something a little bit for the long term and thinking about the long-term outcomes? In cultures with long-term orientation, some companies may put emphasis on arrangements that benefit the longer-term relationship and the longer-term partnership. And this could possibly come at the expense of near-term results.
So now that we're aware of some of the differences across cultures, let's talk about some of the ways that we can adapt our own communication. First, eye contact. Eye contact is a great way to connect with your audience, but it can also be tricky in cultures where power distance is high. Holding eye contact could be seen as a challenge to authority, and when you look at someone, they might look down or look away simply out of politeness or respect. We've learned in this class to try and make eye contact throughout your audience, but in a hierarchical culture, they might expect you to spend a little more focus and attention on those in positions of authority. In a collectivist culture, eye contact could make people feel a little bit uneasy because you're effectively singling them out from the crowd. If I were to hold eye contact with someone for the recommended 5 to 7 seconds, like I'm doing right now with Nathalise, it could become extremely painful for that person. Eye contact can still be an effective tool, but keep in mind that what feels right for you might end up feeling offensive or uncomfortable for someone else. Gestures can also be a powerful communication tool, but remember that different cultures have different levels of expressiveness. In a collectivist culture, you'd be unlikely to see someone with a very animated, high-energy style because, again, that would single them out from the crowd. So if that happens to be your style, you may consider dialing it back just a little bit. In addition, some gestures that are common in the US can be quite offensive in other countries. So before you tell your audience that things are going great with an enthusiastic thumbs up, you may want to consider anyone in your audience who's from Greece, who you'd effectively be telling up yours. As far as directness, in this class, we learned to use the inverted pyramid structure. That is to start with your main idea and then add supporting details. In the US, we appreciate this direct approach and getting to the point, but that approach might not work in other countries. In Japan, for example, it would be common to see a work email that might start by saying something like, "Now it is autumn, and the delicate red leaves are blanketing the cool earth with color." Try starting your work emails in the US with some poetic prose about the seasons. People are probably going to think you're a little weird. But in other countries, it would be perfectly normal and expected to spend a little more time and effort up front to nurture the relationship. And you risk coming across as all business with a US-style approach. When it comes to writing, we learn to use strong verbs, active voice, clear language. But in cultures that value indirectness, passive voice and ambiguous words might actually be preferred. Now, we're really only scratching the surface here. We reached out to many of you and asked if there was anything we learned in class that might not go so well in your home country or in places where you worked. We learned that in Nigeria, speaking above your normal voice level could actually be considered rude. We learned that in Mexico, a presentation that might be considered normal in the US could come across as exaggerated or over the top in both style and content. We learned that in Latin America or in Kenya and other parts of Africa, work emails are still expected to have very formal language. And interestingly, we learned that in Bulgaria, people actually shake their head to say yes and nod their head to say no, which would be incredibly confusing, as you can imagine. So, as you can see, there are many different ways that cultural principles apply across the world, but it's important to remember that the overarching strategy remains the same, which is to know your audience, know your intent, and know your message.
Thank you, Tim. So I imagine that a few of you might feel a bit frustrated right now, right? After a whole quarter of strategic communication where you're just thinking, I think I kind of got it now. We are just pulling the rug from beneath you. And now you might feel, man, how can I possibly keep track of all these different cultures? And now, you know what? I'm a little worried that I might mess up. Is one in here that might relate to that feeling? Show of hands. I like that. And you know what? For all those, most of you who raise your hand, I think you have a point. Like, I agree with you. Because the reality is that most of us in this room, as far as I know, aren't chameleons, right? We're not going to seamlessly blend in and perfectly adapt to any social, cultural context. We're humans, and that means that sooner or later, we are going to mess up. And you know what? That's okay. Because we have a secret little weapon here today, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is our third and last A of the day, acknowledgement. If you're in a situation in which you feel like there might be a cultural mismatch, simply acknowledging that fact can be hugely powerful. And I'll show you what I mean, all right? Something like this. I'm aware that things are done differently here than where I'm from, right? So please excuse me and let me know if I do or say something inappropriate. Now, of course, you don't have to use that exact sentence, but there are a couple of things I'd like to highlight that are going on there. First of all, I'm saying, you know what, I know there are differences. And the truth is that your audience might be just as anxious at appearing rude towards you as you are as appearing rude towards them. And just simply acknowledging those differences can help everyone relax a bit and focus on the things you have in common rather than those differences. Second, I'm apologizing in advance for any mistakes I might do, right? So first of all, I'm showing respect, but I'm also giving myself carte blanche to keep on moving in my presentation even if I do a little mistake here and there. Last, I'm asking for feedback, which shows that I'm trying to learn and to improve. What this also does is it overcomes the fact that in many situations, many audiences in certain cultures especially, might be just too polite to tell you, even if you're doing something wrong again and again and again and again. So most of all, what acknowledgement does is that it lets you stop worrying too much about messing up, about stepping on toes, and it lets you focus on the message you were there to deliver in the first place, right? And that's really what matters. And so now I think you know the secret. Next time you're on the road to go to a business meeting, deliver a presentation in a new country or continent, remember that you have the triple A's of global communication to help you. So A, aware. Do your research. A, adapt. Try to respect and emulate. And A, acknowledge. Address those differences. Now I want to thank you all for listening, and we'd love to answer questions about how you can best use the AAA method over here to become a more sensitive global communicator.